Good morning to everybody. Unfortunately, and I apologize to anybody who's going to be listening to the recording, we do not have video today because I left the SD card at home, which was bound to happen at some point. But hopefully the audio will suffice. To be an aspect of still feeling like you're here. We feel like you're here, and it gives a special siyata d'shmaya. It's not just the people in the room, it's Baruch Hashem, hundreds of people around the world who are joining us all the time in all of our learning, and we welcome them. And we thank Hashem, we have the privilege to learn with them, and that they're joining us. Okay, so let's jump in. We begin with Kesser Shem Tov Pei Beis, a very, very important teaching. And the tzaddik says, Meha Baal Shem, Mashal HaMelech Echad Shemoishal B'Kippah. He says there's a parable of a king who ruled B'Kippah, doesn't mean like with a couple, right? Shemoishal B'Kippah, he ruled with force. He was a resolute ruler. And because it's going to be referencing Hashem, we want to be careful. It's not like a dictator, so anything like that. But a king who had absolute dominion and control. And he sent one of his loyal servants, a messenger, who that this person should take on the role and the guise of a rebel. Somebody who was rebelling against the kingdom, somebody who intended to make a coup and to overthrow the government, as it were. So he went around to the different countries that are part of this general kingdom, or he went from city to city. And today you could really envision what's going on in Syria, what happened in Syria, what's happening in Syria. It's not so impossible to imagine. It's mafchid. It's absolutely wild. What's going on there. But you could imagine such a thing, where this person goes and he leads a rebel army from country to country, from city to city, and a number of the cities fought back and defended and protested. The Sholtu Alav, and they had the opportunity to push those forces back. But a number of the cities, it turned out, were very happy, actually, that there was a rebel army and they wanted to join forces to rebel against the king. And in one of the countries, and this was like a unique thing, they understood that this rebel was actually working for the king. They were able to see past the illusion, and they didn't have a visceral response, not from the standpoint of protesting against this rebel, and not from the standpoint of joining him, certainly. But they recognized there's something deeper happening over here. They saw through the ploy. They understood that it's a test. They understood that it's not real. It's not objective. They understood that this itself is an expression of the total dominion of the king. Not only can't there possibly be something that's fundamentally rebelling against that king, against the government, but beyond that, even that which appears to be against is actually part and parcel of, because nothing happens in the kingdom without the direct influence of the king. So Nimshal move on. Says everybody could understand the nimshal of this. He says there are some people who do battle with the Yetzer Hara as if the Yetzer Hara was an independent, objective force that was coming to seduce a person away from the king, and that the reaction and the response against the Yetzer Hara carries that kind of energy. Meaning, even if the person overcomes the Yetzer Hara, the question is how we are perceiving what the Yetzer Hara really is in the first place. Right? So meaning, even though the person is not falling for their taiva, a person is overcoming, but they literally see the Yetzer Hara as a eved moired ba'adonai, as a servant that's rebelling against the master. That a person should not do the will of Hashem, shehu melech ha'olam, who's the king of the world. And they overwhelm this force, and they stand against it until they're privileged and they merit to overcome the Yetzer Hara entirely. But all the while that they're doing this, according to the Baal Shem Tov, there's already a tzad chisaron, right? Which is like a very high level, meaning even though the person is literally overcoming the Yetzer Hara, oimid b'nisayan, there could still be a little bit of deviation from the true truth that's laced into how the person conceives of the Yetzer Hara in the first place that he's overcoming. Because all the while that a person sees the Yetzer Hara as an independent force in and of itself, like the Muslims, the Muslims view the devil like is the devil. The Christians for sure, the Satan is mamish Satan, but even in Islam, it's like God created it but gave it absolute free reign. It's its own force, untethered. It's a scary thing. In Jewish theology, we don't have any such concept. The Ramchal and Adar B'Amarim, which I quote a lot, to me it's the culmination of all the Ramchal's writings. Is a Sefer Adar B'Amarim, which my dear friend and Rebbe Joey Rosenfeld is giving shiurim on now. It's on YouTube. Everybody's encouraged to follow his shiur. He starts literally from the beginning, and he's going through Adar B'Amarim. It's one of the most difficult Kabbalah Svarim, and he just has a way of explaining it, I think, simply, sweetly, and directly, and clearly. So the Ramchal says in Adar B'Amarim the most incredible thing. He says the Satan, which is, the Gemara Baba Basra tells us, Hu Satan, Hu Malach Hamavas, Hu Yetzer Hara, it's all the same fellow, is a dog, is a kelev, that the master, which is HaKadosh Baruch Hu, took the dog off the leash. It's true. The dog is not on the leash. And it can run around at will. But the Ramchal says, but there is a fence. So this that the Yetzer Hara appears to be running rampant is from the standpoint, again, in a metaphor, is that it's not leashed. But make no mistake, right? There's a fence. And that fence is absolute and definitive. And this is Am Yisrael's concept of the Yetzer Hara, which nichlal and included in the Baal Shem Tov's perception is even deeper, is that it's literally an expression of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's ratzon. That to the Baal Shem Tov, and that concept of, for example, the Baal Shem Tov's understanding of Hashgacha, which we understand is not according to all the Rishonim, but there were Rishonim that held this way, and the Baal Shem Tov's B'china Hilchos HaKabasrai, the Baal Shem Tov paskin, so to speak, like the Rishonim that hold Hashgacha is literally absolute. And the Baal Shem Tov's famous teaching that a leaf doesn't fall from a tree, in an arbitrary way. As the Baal Shem Tov's famous mashal, every leaf, the amount of times it will turn, and how it will blow in the wind, and where it will end up, and then everything that happens with that leaf until it absolutely disintegrates, or until it gets swept up and put in some compost, landfill somewhere, whatever happens with that leaf, with direct hashgacha.
Is that why the Shoah is generally taken to be Hester Klein rather than a Yetzer Hara?
That's right. It's not conceived to be something that was outside of the shlita of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, although it's something that we have no idea, we have no answer for. We can only respond to it with silence, right? Because the tragedy on that madrega, we can't even attempt. That's a bechina Rav Nassan says in the Likutei Halacha. So not getting to this now, I don't want to get back to this, but to bring me back to the leaf. But Rav Nassan says that this is the secret of the two parts of the night. That the first part of the night, until Chatzos, the tzaddikim are sleeping. After Chatzos, the tzaddikim wake up, and they're awake until dawn and past dawn. And Rav Nassan says the nighttime is the aspect of Hester Panim, right? The nighttime is darkness. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is, you could say, Hashemesh B'Gvurasai. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the aspect of the sun. Hashem Oiri V'Yishi, and Hashem is light. Darkness, nighttime, is the Hester of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's light. Rav Nassan says that there's a distinction between two kinds of Hester Panim. One kind of Hester Panim, that tzaddikim are able to be mamtik, they're able to sweeten. If you don't mind, thank you. That tzaddikim are able to be mamtik, which is the standpoint of being able to figure out, but do it very gently if you can. It's the standpoint that tzaddikim are able to say gamzu l'toiva, right, or kol mad avrachman l'tavavit, and maybe they could even back it up with some kind of they can find a silver lining. That's after Chatzos. The tzaddikim wake up, it's already getting closer to dawn. But Rav Nassan says, make no mistake. There are experiences of a Hester Panim in a person's own life, and certainly collectively in Jewish history, that are the first half of the night where you just have to sleep. Which means the only way of dealing with it is without using your brain at all. And that's the aspect of shtika. That's the aspect of a Yidam Aaron, right? Of Aaron responding to the deaths of Nadav and Avihu, right? Who are even greater in a certain sense than Moshe and Aaron. He says, now, Rashi tells us, he said, we knew someone would die, but B'Kroiv HaKadosh, now I see that they're even closer to Hashem than we are. And Vayidai. And he responds with silence. So we have to be clear that even though we're saying, sure, everything is under the hashkacha, it's totally on like how we respond to it is dependent on the like sort of the magnitude of the Hester Panim. Okay, so that's like the first half of the night kind of thing. I would put October 7th in that category. And it's very difficult for us. And because we're constantly playing this game where on the one hand we want to show the silver lining, and on the other hand, we have to be very sensitive and careful, especially to people who are affected, and that's the tension. But I just want to bring it 1 second. I want to bring it back to the leaf, right? And that leaf that falls down from the tree. According to the Baal Shem Tov's perception of hashkacha, it's reasonable to suggest that even this, that the dog is off the leash, and you'd have to understand in the metaphor, so what does that mean? Right, it's off the leash, but it's certainly with the direct hashkacha of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Both the concept of a leash, and the concept of being off a leash, and the concept of offense. Right, all of that is from our perspective. From HaKadosh Baruch Hu's perspective, it's absolutely guided. Everything, every bark and every jolt and every pounce and everything that the dog is doing within that perimeter, directly from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. See, he says, this that a person stands up to be oimid b'nisayon and to overcome the Yetzer Hara, but the person does so with the consciousness of thinking that this is a real entity. So according to the Baal Shem, that you're already lost in a sense. You're already lost. That's not the ultimate. Because he said ultimately, B'nai Adam shelo ya'asu ritzon habari yisbarach shuhu, right? So he's mefata, the Yetzer Hara is seducing B'nai Adam shelo ya'asu ritzon habari yisbarach, that they shouldn't do Hashem's will, shuhu melech ha'olam, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the king of the world, va'imdim kenegdai ad shesholta b'yitzram, and they succeed in standing up against him until they overcome the Yetzer Hara al yidei goydel hamalchama v'sigufim gedolim, through the war and the battle and how difficult it is and how real a force it is and it's so powerful and what am I going to do, and that's why they have to have all these different strategies until they're able to overcome it. Baal Shem Tov says, I'll tell you a much better strategy. Much better strategy. V'yesh eila, he says, there are people shehigishu, who have this sense. And we get this sense because now we're so senseless, we're so numb, we're so, our brains don't function properly after, and we have to look towards sane people who are the tzaddikim. Rabbi Nachman, the Baal Shem Tov, these tzaddikim are giving us sanity from the standpoint of how we're actually supposed to approach things and approach ourselves and approach the world. So he says, "V'yesh eila," there are people shehergishu, who have the sense shehu oiser tzayin habayre, that actually the Satan is a shliach from Hashem. Can you imagine that? The Satan, who's trying to convince us to break Ratzon Hashem, is in so doing a tzaddik gamor, from the standpoint of doing exactly what his mitzvah is. The Satan only has one mitzvah in his Torah, so to speak, just seduce people away from doing Ratzon Hashem, and he does that faithfully, mamish faithfully. The Satan, Rabbi Nachman says, the Yetzer Hara in Torah Ayin Beis, he says, Yetzer Hara hu malach kadosh. He says, is a holy angel. He's doing exactly what he was created to do. Doesn't deviate. The Yetzer Hara never sinned. And from our perspective, the Yetzer Hara is mamish, and everything that it says about the Yetzer Hara and Chazal, all that's true from our perspective. We have to treat it as such, because that's the way to, but all with the deeper understanding of what it actually is. Says the Baal Shem, when a person recognizes, and he says, HaKadosh Baruch Hu's name is hinted in this. Something similar to what we learned, I'm sure, in the past about the Baal Shem Tov's Torah on the word chet. That the word chet means to deviate, but there's an extra letter that need not be in that word, and that's the letter aleph that's at the end, because you could just spell chet, ches, with a tzere underneath, and chet, and that's it. But there's a hidden aleph, and the Baal Shem Tov says that aleph is Hashem, it's alufa shel olam. Because there's no experience in this world as godless as it appears, even in a peak godless experience, which is a sin, right, where you think that you're experiencing something that's the opposite of the Ratzon of Hashem, and so God cannot be here while I'm rebelling against Him, kiviyachol. And the Baal Shem Tov says, aleph, there's an aleph at the end. Here the Baal Shem Tov says that not only is Hashem hidden in the chet, which according to the Sfas Emes and the Dagon Machne Ephraim, other tzaddikim, you then manifest that aleph through tshuva post chet, but it has to be authentic, like we're speaking about. It has to be real tshuva, where a person feels brokenhearted, and if a person understands that in the experience of a chet, Hashem is there, and so that the chet loses its danger, so then the tshuva cannot be with Lev Shalim, right? Unless a person really gets to a place of absolute, regret over the fact that he sinned in such a way, in which case tshuva is still possible. But tshuva needs authenticity, and that's what it means. Like we say all the time, which is such an important Ma'amar Chazal for everything we learn, because we're tasting of that perspective where everything is elokus, and that there's a danger there, right? So you have to keep on grounding yourself in authenticity, because without that you can't school the system, and everything will fall apart. So authenticity sits at the core of it. A real tshuva of a broken heart, a real tshuva of shiur and lev, according to the Sfas Emes, will reveal the way in which even the chet, like Reb Tzadok says time and time again in Six Tzaddik, in the Mems, those ICS there, will reveal the way that the chet itself had the presence of Hashem, the ratzon of Hashem. Because somehow, like the Baal Tanya says, the tshuva post-chet is supercharged because of the experience of the yerida, because of the experience of the chet and of the distance. That makes a person so much stronger, right? Like a person's skin, they get a cut, and the scab makes it so much tougher for next time. And like another mashal, it's just different ways of expressing this, but a string that is cut, and then you have to tie the two halves together, the bottom end of the string is going to be higher up than it was originally. Because now it was cut, and now you tie it, and it's higher up. It gets cut, and you tie it, it's higher up. And in some strange way, through the cutting and the process of retying, everything is elevated. And this is the mystery of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's world. This is the mystery, like we learned in our Aros Tshuva Shiurim, in this very arrangement in the beginning of the year, is the secret of the entire creation of the world, which is ultimately a meta yerida, litzorech, a meta aliyah, etc., etc., etc. But authenticity sits at the core of it. Without that, there's nothing, because Chosamei Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu emes. God cannot be present in an experience that's not authentic. God cannot be present there. Because Hashem is authenticity. He is real. Anything that isn't real cannot be godly, no matter how godly it looks. If it's not real, God is not there. It can be the most impressive display of religious splendor. If it's not real, meaning if it's not flowing forth from a genuine religious spirit, which is like a cluster of a whole bunch of different emotions and humility and faith and joy, ava, yira, and so on, God is not present. God is not present. There's a story that I actually quoted in my book, The Story of Our Lives, with a government official that was going around in some city in Ukraine, and he was being taken to the different religious institutions in the city. And in the shul, it was like a broken down, humble shul. And the Rav was a huge Talmud Chacham, but he was very uncouth. He didn't have manners, proper manners. He was a very simple person. He used to, wipe his nose on his sleeve and all sorts of things that it just whatever. But this is what it is. He was just he was a gruff person from that standpoint. But he mamash had a lev tahar, and he was a Talmud Chacham Amiti. And the people were very nervous, because they're bringing around this government official, and he's going to walk in and he's going to say something or do something that's going to be off-putting, and who knows, right? And it'll confirm this terrible stereotype that he has of Jews who are not people that are worth supporting, let's say. And the official stopped at many different institutions throughout his tour of the city. And the shul, the synagogue, was the last stop of the day. And he comes in, and the rabbi hobbles up to the podium, and it's a whole assembly, and this person with the whole royal entourage and everything from the government, the king, whatever. And he starts speaking to them, and he has this coughing fit. And this is exactly what they were worried about. They knew what's happening. And he clears his throat, and he just spits either into a cup or a tissue, in front of everyone, And they were mortified. They thought, it's over. And they couldn't even bear to look. They were covering their faces. And he gives a speech, very passionate speech. And afterwards, they all gathered around, all the people gathered around this official to hear his royal, his take, his reflection on the whole day's proceedings. And he said, I want to tell you. He said, along my journey today, I stopped in a number of religious buildings and institutions. And he says, I just came from here from the Catholic Church, just like this huge, magnificent building with this choir, and everybody has what's it called, an outfit, gowns, whatever, like everybody's dressed in their finery, and stained glass windows and angelic, everything is. And he said, from there, and they knew where this is going, he said, and from there I came here. He said, I want to tell you something. He said, there I saw beauty. Here I saw truth. There I saw beauty. Here it's not so beautiful. But over here I saw truth. It wasn't a show. It wasn't a performance. If you don't have MS, you cannot have Hashem. This is 100% true 100% of the time. It has to be authentic. If it's not authentic, God is not there. So an authentic tshuva, says the Sfas Emes and Reb Tzaddik and all the tzaddikim, is what activates the aleph that was hidden in the chet, from the standpoint of the Maimar Chazal that says if a person does tshuva out of ava, which is the most authentic tshuva there is, because tshuva out of yira is still a little bit unauthentic from the standpoint of a person who has real emunah, but they're doing it because they're afraid of getting punished. That's still not the most authentic. The most authentic is tshuva me'ava. Purim is tshuva me'ava. Sukkos, right? Tshuva me'ava. Tshuva me'ava zdoinos nepchu l'schuyos. Your sin turns into a mitzvah. And the ches and the tes fade away, and all that's left is the glowing aleph. Unbelievable thing. So the Baal Shem Tov says that in as much as the chet contains the aleph, if you understand that the reason that a person did the chet came from the Yetzer Hara, and the inyan of the Yetzer Hara is really a shliach from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, he says, so look deeply into the name of the Satan. What's the name of the Satan? Samach, Aleph, Mem, or Samach Mem rather, Aleph Lamed, right? Which we don't really pronounce, Sama, right? With Kel at the end. Which is the Oisius, the Sfarim say, Lissameh, to blind. That's his whole thing. It's to blind us, to prevent us from seeing reality for what reality truly is.
There must be some Kel.
So that's slightly what he says. He doesn't really take that route, but what he does say, which is beautiful, because really it's with the sin, but the sin and Samach are interchangeable. The Baal Shem Tov says those first three letters, Samach, Aleph, Lamed, are actually one of the divine names as part of what's called the Shem Ayin Beis, the name of 72 letters. The way that you get the Shem Ayin Beis, right, is there are three psukim in around Az Yashir, which are the psukim Vayisa, or not Az Yashir, but Kriyas Yamsuf, Vayisa, Vayavai, Vayet. These are three different psukim that describe Am Yisrael's traveling into the Yamsuf. Vayisa, Vayava, Vayet. There are 72 letters in this pasuk, and the way that you get these 72 names of Hashem is by couplings of three. So you take the first letter of the first pasuk, you take the last letter of the middle pasuk, and the first letter of the last pasuk, and that becomes one coupling. And you keep on doing this, and it's like as you do it, the Shem travels, right? And it's the traveling of Klal Yisrael through the Yamsuf, right? There's two psukim on this side, and as right, they're traveling forward, and these are traveling backward, just like a person travels, he's moving, and it's moving very, very deep, because it gets into relativity, who's actually moving, and it's like a bechina of both. They're moving, and the walls are moving, and as you move, you keep on getting couplings of three. One of those couplings is Samach, Aleph, Lamed. Samach, Aleph, Lamed, which is actually Rosh Tevis, Slach, Lanu, Avinu. And it's actually Gematria 91, which is the gematria of, the ultimate yichud of Yud Kei Vav Kei, which is transcendent element of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Kutsha B'richu, and the immanent aspect of existence as we see it, which is the Shechina Aleph Daled Nun Yud, gematria Sukkah. Nun 91 is Gematria Amen. It's the Tehillim of Yoshe B'Seisar Elyon, all of it. I said Amen. Yeah, and so many others. Slach Lanu Avinu. And it's Rosh Hashanah. Rabbi Nachman teaches us this. Ata Seiser Li. You protect me. Mitzar Titzreini. Rabbi Nachman says when you say that pasuk, which is in Tikkun HaKlali, so we should say it often. Rabbi Nachman instituted, you have to make a pause between the first three words and the fourth word. Ata Seiser Li. Rabbi Nachman says on the Kutumran, got to stop. Mitzar Titzreini. Why? Because if you say it, Ata Seiser Li, and then you have the right next to it is the word Mitzar, you just created the tziruf of Samach, right? Samach Mem Aleph Lamed. That's. But in saying Ata Seiser Li and pausing, you're excising from within the Satan literally one of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's names. You're seeing within the Satan B'chvayda v'atzmai the kavod of Baruch Shem Kavod Malchus. You're seeing the kavod of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So he says every time you look at the Samach Mem, he says V'sham Melubish, go back inside V'sham Melubish Shmai HaKadosh Min Ayim Beis Shemas HaKedumim. Literally coded into the name of the Satan is one of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's holy names from the Ayin Beis Shemas. Shu Samach Aleph Lam, which is a Shem of Chesed. Shem Ayin Beis Gematria Chesed. As opposed to the Shem Mem Beis, which we learned about in the context of Adam B'Kayach, which is the Shem of Gvura, which is Rosh Tevis Ma'aseh Bereshis, right? Which is the instituting of Teva, as opposed to Kriyas Yamsuf, which is the shattering of Teva. It's the name of Chesed, just explodes everything. Mem Beis is the Shem of Gvura. Ayin Beis Gematria Chesed. A name of a Kadosh Baruch whose kindness is powering the Yetzer Hara, which is a Bechina of Din. Shu mamtik l'samach mem aleph lamed. That's sweetening this terrible force. V'zehu, and he adds another thing. Shekavana Shem HaKadosh Chaf Vav Zayin Vav. There's a holy name that's called Chaf Vav Zayin Vav. The way you get this holy name is taking the name Yud Ke Vav Ke and just looking at the letters that follow all of those four letters. Right. So the Yud becomes a Chaf, the He becomes a Vav, the Vav becomes a Zayin, and the He becomes a Vav. Interestingly enough, most of us know that the name that faces us, especially if you have a glass case of your mezuzah, but it's sometimes printed on the case itself, is the name Shakai. But you should know that in the back of the mezuzah is written another shame, which is this, which is Chav Vav Zayin Vav, and then the same process for the word Elokeinu, which is Beis Mem Vav Chaf Mem Zayin, and then again Chav Vav Zayin Vav. That's Hashem Elokeinu Hashem. That's written on the outside of the mezuzah. Fascinating. Which is the aspect of the outside of the mezuzah because it's the casing. That's called Acharayim, and that's what the name is, right? It's that which comes after God's name. It's that which conceals HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But says the Baal Shem Tov, that name Chav Vav Zayin Vav, that appears to be the name of Din because it conceals, right? It covers the name Yud Ke Vav Ke. He says you can't get away from it. No matter what, yesh chav vav. Like already there's chav vav, which is gematria Yud Ke Vav Ke. Right? Meaning even the name, right, that ostensibly conceals Yud Ke Vav Ke, it just pops back in because ultimately, right, the chaf and the vav, which are concealing Yud and Hey, is still 26. It's still Yud Ke Vav Ke. HaKadosh Baruch Hu's presence is on every level, in every way, shape, and in every form. It's there in the Pnimius, it's there in the Chitzonius, it's there in the Mezuzah, it's there in the case, it's there. It's always there because there is literally Ein Od Milvado. And all these teachings from the Baal Shem Tov are just helping us to understand in deeper and deeper ways and in all of the shades and nuances and all the facets and all the aspects of life, just in millions and millions of ways, it's just one message. No matter what you're going through, no matter what you're faced with, no matter what oppositional force appears to be threatening you, you have to be able to look at it, and I have to hopefully one day be able to look at it and see HaKadosh Baruch Hu in it and not be fooled. And then the strategy shifts because then you're not doing battle with an adversary. You're part of a game. You're part of a game. You understand the game, and it changes the entire dynamic of what this relationship is, because it's no longer the scary Yetzer Hara. you see it as doing exactly what it was supposed to do. You know what it's supposed to do. You know what you're supposed to do, and you carry on. And Adrabah, like it says in Kedushas Lev in a slightly different way, but I'll just apply it here. From your enemy, you can take a lesson. Why? Because what's the Yetzer Hara doing when it attacks you? Mamish keeping Ratzon Hashem. So Gavalt. So keep Hashem, keep Ratzon Hashem with him. Say, great, you'll be the chavrusa. You want to serve Hashem together? Let's do it. You serve Hashem by doing what you're supposed to do. I'll serve Hashem by doing what I'm supposed to do, which happens to be not listening to what you're telling me to do. And in that way, everything is fixed. And that's the ultimate gilui. Huh? Do as I do, not as I say. Gevaldik. Right? So we're supposed to follow what the Yetzer Hara does, not what the Yetzer Hara says. Should be Zeicha. Ashreinu Yidden. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day. ואתה האב שלי שכל כך אוהב אותי האב שלי מלך חי וקיים על כל נשימה שאני